A boy who never grows old, trapped by a secret darker than childhood whimsy. Behind the tale we cherish as pure adventure lies a true story of loss so deep it froze its creator, J. M. Barrie, forever between innocence and grief. The original Peter Pan was not comforting. He was cruel. His Neverland was not meant to save children. It was meant to keep them from becoming adults. Subscribe if you are ready. To understand why, we have to revisit the wound that inspired the world's most haunting fairy tale. In the winter of 1867, a boy named David glided across the frozen Airlie Burn in Scotland. He was 13, the pride of his mother, Margaret Ogilvy. On the eve of his birthday, the ice gave way. David fell through and never came home. 6-year-old James, J. M. Barrie, stood in the shadow of that loss, watching his family splinter around a silence that would last a lifetime. Margaret withdrew into her grief, her world shrinking to memories of her favourite son. She spoke of David as if he was still in the next room. "He would never grow any older," she whispered. "He is a boy still." The house filled with the echo of a child who would never grow up, while the living sun tried to fill a space he could never reach. James began to wear his brother's clothes. He learned to whistle the way David had. He tried to become the boy his mother missed, hoping to draw her gaze back from the past. In his memoirs, Barrie remembered this time without sentiment. "I was to take his place, to be a boy who never grew up." The idea of eternal childhood was not a fantasy for Barrie. It was a wound, one that never closed. Every birthday, every year that passed, marked him as the child who survived, but never truly belonged. His mother's love, frozen in the moment of David's death, became a force that shaped the rest of his life. If the shadows of Neverland seem familiar, it is because they began in a real nursery, with a real boy lost, and another left behind to haunt the edges of his own story. If you find yourself drawn to the hidden side of fairy tales, subscribe for more. The story that follows is not about magic, but about the cost of refusing to grow up. James Barrie entered adulthood carrying the weight of a childhood that never quite ended. He stood 5 feet 3 inches tall, a man whose physical presence matched the emotional smallness he carried from his earliest years. In 1894, he married Mary Ansell, an actress he met during his first taste of theatrical success. Theirs was a union that, on paper, promised the ordinary comforts of partnership. In reality, it was marked by a quiet, persistent distance. Friends and biographers later described their marriage as sibling-like. Mary wrote that they lived as brother and sister. The couple kept separate bedrooms. Letters and court records from their 1909 divorce reveal a home without intimacy. Barrie confided to a friend that he had no passion for women. There were no children. The silence between them grew until it became impossible to ignore. Barrie filled the empty spaces of his domestic life with work and long walks, often alone. He preferred the company of his books, his dog, and increasingly the children of others. The failure of his marriage was not a sudden storm, but a gradual drifting apart. When Mary found companionship elsewhere, Barrie did not fight to keep her. In the official filings, adultery was cited, but those who knew them understood the deeper truth: their marriage had never truly begun. His adult life, much like his childhood, became a study in avoidance of desire, of conflict, of the natural progression from boy to man. The world outside moved forward, but Barry seemed content to remain on the edge, watching. The search for connection would soon lead him into the lives of 5 young brothers in Kensington Gardens and into the creation of a story that would echo his own unfinished growing up. In the spring of 1897, James Barrie wandered the winding paths of Kensington Gardens, his St. Bernard padding alongside him. That is where he first crossed paths with the Llewellyn Davies boys. George, the eldest, was 4. Jack, just a year younger, trailed after him. Peter was still a baby in a pram, with Michael and Nico yet to be born. Barrie struck up conversations with their nurse, then with their mother Sylvia. The boys called him Uncle Jim almost from the start, a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life. Barrie did not just tell stories, he created worlds. In the gardens, he spun tales of pirates and fairies, inviting the boys to play along. They staged mock battles with imaginary swords, held fairy funerals for broken toys, and charted secret maps of the Serpentine's Islands. Barrie photographed these adventures in a private album he called The Boy Castaways of Black Lake Island, capturing George, Jack and Peter acting out scenes that would later find their way into Neverland. The boys became his companions and muses. He watched them closely, noting their quirks and fears, the way they argued and made peace. Each brother offered something different: George's boldness, Jack's stubbornness, Peter's quiet watchfulness, Michael's dreamy spirit, and Nico's wide-eyed devotion. Barrie wove their personalities into his stories, blending memory and make-believe until the line between the two vanished. He was not their father, nor quite a friend. He was something in between. A grown man who spoke their language, who seemed to understand the longing for a world where mothers never leave and children never have to say goodbye. In the shade of the old trees, the seeds of Neverland began to grow, watered by Barrie's longing and the boys' laughter, but touched always by something a little lonely, a little strange. The earliest drafts of Peter Pan did not hide their cruelty. In the 1904 stage script, Peter's world was a place where childhood had sharp edges, and growing up was met with punishment. Barrie's handwritten notes for Act 3 are explicit. When the Lost Boys begin to show signs of age, Peter thins them out. The phrase is delivered without sentiment, a clinical euphemism for erasure. In private versions of the script, this meant death, sometimes by Peter's own hand, sometimes by silent abandonment. The 1911 novel Peter and Wendy preserves the line, "When you grow up, you will have to be thinned out." No explanation, no comfort, just the rule of Neverland. Peter's violence is not limited to pirates. In the same drafts, he kills without hesitation, dispatching enemies and, if necessary, friends. The Lost Boys are nameless, interchangeable, forgotten as soon as they leave his sight. Barrie wrote that to die will be an awfully big adventure, and in Neverland, death is always close, woven into the fabric of play. The fantasy is not one of safety, but of suspended consequence, where memory and mercy are in short supply. These early manuscripts reveal a version of Peter Pan that is far from the playful trickster of bedtime stories. Here, childhood is preserved at any cost, even if the cost is the children themselves. Neverland, in Barrie's own words, is a place where time stands still because nothing is allowed to survive its passing. Neverland promises adventure, but its rules are written in silence. Children arrive stripped of history and family, their pasts erased the moment they set foot on the island. There are no mothers, no fathers, no teachers, no birthdays, no seasons. The sun never really sets, and nothing truly changes. The Lost Boys, do not have surnames or stories of where they came from. They are known only by nicknames: Tootles, Nibs, Slightly, Curly, the twins, each one a blank slate, easily replaced or forgotten. Life in Neverland revolves around endless play, but it is a game without winners. The boys hunt, fight, and feast, yet their victories are hollow. There is no growing up, no growing old. Time stands still, but not in the way a child hopes. It is not freedom from rules, it is a world where nothing new can ever begin. Without adults to guide them, the Lost Boys are left to invent their own order. Peter is their leader, but his memory is fickle, his affections fleeting. When a boy disappears, whether lost in battle, forgotten, or simply grown too tall, no one speaks his name again. The island covers its losses with new arrivals, each boy as anonymous as the last. Neverland is not a sanctuary. It is a place where childhood is frozen, where identity dissolves, and where the cost of never growing up is paid in anonymity. The promise of endless play masks a deeper captivity, the absence of future, the erasure of self. Wendy Darling enters Neverland not as an adventurer, but as a caretaker. Each night she sows shadows, tells stories, and tucks the Lost Boys into bed. Her place is not among the pirates or in flight, but at the hearth, mending, soothing, and keeping order in a world built to deny change. Wendy becomes the mother the island lacks, her value measured by how well she preserves the illusion of innocence. When she starts to grow, feeling the first stirrings of adulthood, Neverland turns cold. Maturity is exile. Captain Hook stalks the island, haunted by the relentless tick of a swallowed clock. The crocodile that follows him is more than a beast. It is time itself, impossible to escape, always drawing closer. Hook is the only character who remembers what he has lost. He knows what it means to fear the future, to feel the years slipping away. While Peter crows and forgets, Hook listens for the sound that marks him as prey. Tinkerbell, small and bright, burns with jealousy. Her love for Peter is fierce, possessive, and dangerous. She tries to kill Wendy, not out of mischief, but out of desperation. In Barry's play, Tinkerbell convinces the Lost Boys to shoot Wendy down, then later poisons her medicine. She lives only as long as she is believed in, her very existence a plea for attention. The moment belief fades, she flickers and dies, a warning about the cost of needing to be needed. Neverland's magic is not gentle. It binds its children in roles they cannot outgrow, each one trapped by the thing they fear most, to be forgotten, to be hunted by time, or to vanish when love is withdrawn. The story's wonder is edged with dread, each character a fragment of the price paid for eternal childhood. In late Victorian Britain, childhood was shadowed by loss. Nearly 2 out of every 5 children died before reaching adulthood, a child mortality rate of about 40%. Death was not a distant threat, but a constant presence in the home. Families dressed their lost children in their best clothes, posed them for final photographs, and displayed these images on mantelpieces as if sleep had simply overtaken them. Mourning rituals became woven into daily life, with black crepe and angelic portraits serving as reminders of innocence cut short. Writers and artists of the era responded with stories that tried to sweeten the ache. Books like The Water Babies and sentimental poems about angelic children offered comfort to parents, promising that the young were untouched by the world's cruelties. The idea of a child who could remain forever young, untouched by time and safe from harm, held a powerful appeal in a society where so few children survived. This longing for preserved innocence was not just personal, it was cultural. The fantasy of eternal youth grew from a soil rich with grief and ritual, preparing the ground for stories that promised escape from the ordinary fate of growing up. Neverland was not born from whimsy. It was born from the desperate wish to freeze a fleeting moment before it too slipped away. George Llewellyn Davies was the first to go. In March 1915, he was killed by a sniper's bullet at the age of 21, fighting in the trenches of World War I. Michael, Barry's favourite, the boy with the faraway eyes, who inspired the dreamiest parts of Neverland, was found drowned in the Thames at Oxford in 1921. He was 20. Some called it a tragic accident, others whispered about a suicide pact. Peter, who gave his name to Barry's eternal child, spent decades trying to escape the shadow of the story. He called it that terrible masterpiece, and he burned letters and photographs that tied him to Neverland. In 1960, at 63, Peter stepped in front of a train at Sloane Square station. Barry outlived them all, except Nico and Jack. In a letter to Cynthia Asquith after Michael's death, Barry wrote that the loss was the tragedy of my life. The boys who had once filled his days with laughter and make-believe were gone, leaving behind only memories and a story that promised youth forever. Neverland, for Barry, became less a playground and more a mausoleum, a place where time stood still because the living could not bear to move forward. The cost of eternal childhood was paid in grief, one boy at a time. In 1953, Walt Disney's team gathered around a table covered in sketches and storyboards, debating how much of Barry's original story could survive on the silver screen. Internal memos from those story conferences show the guiding principle: soften the edges, brighten the shadows. The Lost Boys were given names and personalities. The threat of being thinned out for growing up vanished, replaced by harmless mischief and happy endings. Tinker Bell's jealousy became a comic pout, and her murderous rage was erased. Captain Hook, once stalked by the inevitability of time, was recast for laughs, chased by a crocodile whose ticking clock sounded more like a joke than a warning. Wendy, who in Barry's world was burdened by domestic duty and the pain of leaving childhood behind, became the wide-eyed heroine, her mothering gentle, and her growing up a simple choice. Neverland's dangers blurred into adventure, its loneliness hidden behind colour and song. The film's production notes show careful calculation, what to keep, what to cut, how to make the story safe for children and marketable for families. For documentaries, using Disney's version means following strict rules. Clips must be under 7 seconds to meet fair use guidelines. Rights clearances require a checklist, and direct contact with Barry biographer Andrew Birkin is recommended for archival materials. The Disney film became the public's memory of Peter Pan, a myth washed clean of its Victorian shadows, leaving the original's warning hidden beneath a layer of pixie dust. Today, our culture clings to youth and avoids the shadows of growing up, just as Barry's story warned. Escapism sells, but emotional stasis costs us more than we admit. The world still chases Neverland, but time never stops ticking. What we choose to face or deny shapes who we become. What does Neverland look like now?